Good morning to you all, and I take this opportunity to extend a warm welcome to the course Analytical Biochemistry 2. Now, this course is an extension of the course Analytical Biochemistry 1, which we have discussed in the previous semester. And in this semester, with respect to the course Analytical Biochemistry 2, I will be discussing some of the concepts of Unit 4 for this online teaching learning process. If you recollect, the concepts which we discussed in the previous semester with reference to the course Analytical Biochemistry 1, the focus was on choice of the biological source, to isolate the specific biomolecule, and purification of the biomolecule using some of the analytical tools, and characterization of the biomolecule with reference to its physical property and chemical property. Now the question is whether it is possible to characterize the whole intact biomolecule. So this was not answered in any of the technique which we had discussed in the course Analytical Biochemistry 1. So it was all about how the biological sample or the source is selected, what are the conditions to be met, and how the biomolecules are isolated, the isolation procedures, and how the biomolecules are purified, on what conditions or the parameters the purification methods are designed. So all these were discussed in Analytical Biochemistry 1. But nowhere we addressed a characterization or a complete characterization of the whole intact biomolecules. So this is with relevance to, or it could be for proteins, peptides, oligosaccharides, DNA fragments, and other large biomolecules. And it is possible, that means characterization of whole intact biomolecule is made possible, and the credit goes to the advent of two ionization techniques. So these two techniques bring in large molecules as well as polar molecules and thermolabile molecules from the solution or solid phase to the gas phase as intact molecular ions. So here we need to understand some of the specific terminologies that we use throughout our discussion. As an example, just now I said molecular ions. So please focus on some of these terminologies when we discuss the concepts of these tools to characterize the whole intact biomolecule. So it is made possible, or now it is possible with the advent of the ionization techniques, so that the large polar and thermolabile molecules from the solution or from the solid phase to the gas phase as intact molecular ions. So now we will be, or our focus is on these ions. So what are those two ionization techniques which has made it possible to characterize the whole intact biomolecule? So the credit is for these two techniques. Number one, electrospray ionization, abbreviated as ESI, and number two, matrix assisted laser desorption or ionization, abbreviated as MALDI. Colloquially it is pronounced as MALDI. So the techniques, the electrospray ionization, that is ESI, and matrix assisted laser desorption ionization, that is MALDI, have revolutionized the field of biological sciences. And this technique has opened doors to several types of developments and hundreds of applications. Today you can characterize any of the biological molecule which we discussed in the previous slide, be it proteins, peptides, oligosaccharides, etc., with the development of such novel innovative techniques. So our discussion will be on the principle and instrumentation of the mass spectrometry. So as the name indicates, the crucial parameter is all about the mass of the biomolecule. So you will get the accurate mass with this mass spectrometry. And there are variations to the basic mass spectrometry that we will be discussing after understanding the principle and instrumentation of the basic mass spectrometry, because variations are also equally important. Using the mass, then you can do lot of studies. The beauty of the technique is a never ending story. So let us try to understand why mass spectrometry is so important in biological sciences. Mass spectrometry is extremely sensitive. See, when we speak about any analytical technique, the first question that comes to our mind is the sensitivity. How good or how sensitive the technique is in terms of detecting a molecule. So sensitivity is very critical when we are trying to analyze the mass of a biomolecule. And second thing is specificity of the technique. So the mass spectrometry provides or fulfills both these conditions. It is extremely sensitive and it is a specific analytical tool or the technique which is capable of both qualitative as well as quantitative data analysis. See, in one analytical technique, you are getting all the features. That means the the mass spectrometry is extremely sensitive. It is a specific technique and it is capable of providing both qualitative data as well as quantitative data. And the required analyte concentration, if you can just see, it ranges from nanomolar to attomolar, that is 10 to the power of minus 18. So you can analyze how sensitive the technique is. That is why I have used the word extremely sensitive, because it is capable of providing qualitative and quantitative analytical data on nanomolar to attomolar amounts of the analyte. And it has been applied successfully to a very wide range of analytical problems in various fields of biological sciences. Today you find the use of the MS, that is mass spectrometry, in many fields covered by biological sciences. And these mass spectrometers, they have become far or more accessible, and nowadays they are more economical, or the cheaper ones are available for easy buying, and even the operation, it is user friendly. So just one or two training is or maybe sufficient enough for a learner to learn how the instrument works, how to operate the instrument. So it is user friendly to that extent. Especially all these developments have happened in just one decade, that is in just last decade. They have become more accessible, economical to buy, and user friendly. So this is mainly a consequence of the advent of compact benchtop instruments. Nowadays you don't see big instruments, big mass spectrometers. You find a benchtop model, and this is usually coupled to a gas chromatography or liquid chromatography. We can discuss about the variations little later, after understanding the basic principle of the or how the mass spectrometer works. Right? So if you just look at the components of mass spectrophotometer, all mass spectrophotometer, the mass spectrometers, they comprise four main components. First one, an ion source, because ionization should happen, where the sample molecules are ionized by various methods. We will see what are the different ionization methods that are used to ionize the sample. at a later stage. And the second component is the mass analyzer. So this component actually separates the ions according to their mass to charge ratio, abbreviated as M by Z. M refers to mass and Z refers to charge. So first component of the spectrometer is ion source, where the sample molecules are ionized. Second component is the mass analyzer, that separates ions according to their, that means according to each ion mass to charge ratio. The third component is the detector, that measures the abundances of the separated ions as an electrical signal. And the fourth component is a recording device that converts the detector signal into a more suitable form for easy analysis and further study. Right. So these are the four main components of any mass spectrometer. Number one, ion source. Number two, the mass analyzer. Number three, the detector. Number four, a recording device. Right. If you just look at the principle, I have given the principle in nutshell. The first step in the mass spectrometric analysis of compounds is the production of gas phase ions of the compound. That means you have to ionize the compound. If M over here represents the compound, so through electron ionization, the fragmentation happens. You can see how the fragmentation happens with respect to M as a compound. So the first step is the production of ions by ionization techniques. There are several ionization techniques. And this molecular ion normally undergoes fragmentation. Because it is a radical cation with an odd number of electrons, it can fragment to give either a radical and an ion with even number of electrons, or a molecule and a new radical cation. So it can happen in two ways. Further fragmentation can happen in two ways. Since it is a radical cation with an odd number of electrons, it can fragment further to give either a radical plus an ion with an even number of electrons, or a molecule and a new radical cation. Right. Now we need we need a lot of focus on the important differences between these two types of ions, and we need to write them very correctly. And these two types of ions have different chemical properties also. See, you have an even ion and an odd ion. So these two types of ions have different chemical properties. Each primary product ion derived from the molecular ion can in turn undergo fragmentation and the process continues. So all these ions, even ion, odd ion, all these ions are separated in the mass spectrometer according to their mass to charge ratio, and they are detected in proportion to their abundance. So what happens? The first step is production of gas phase ions of the compound by ionization methods, and the radical cation, which is having an odd number of electrons, fragment to give either a radical and an ion with even number of electrons, or a molecule with a new radical cation. Now all these ions, they are separated in the mass spectrometer according to their mass to charge ratio, and then they are detected in proportion to their abundance. Okay. So after fragmentation, you get ions. These ions are separated based on their mass to charge ratio, and then they are detected in proportion to their abundance in the detector. Right. If you just look at the graph over here, you have the x-axis and the y-axis. One refers to the abundance, the relative abundance, that means with respect to the ions, and the other one represents m by z, that is mass to charge ratio. So both are required. The ions are separated based on mass to charge, and they are detected in proportion to their abundance. Right. If you just take an example of methanol, I have taken the very simple example. You can see the mass spectrum of methanol by electron ionization, which is presented both as a graph and as well as a table. So a lot to understand with respect to the graph and table, because with this simple molecule, if we can understand the principle of how the MS works, then it will be easy to understand the variations of the MS. So this is the mass spectrum of methanol represented by a graph as well as a table. In either presentation, the most intense peak is called the base peak. Most intense peak, that means with respect to relative abundance. So here the peak number 31 refers to the base peak, and it is arbitrarily assigned the relative abundance of 100%. Right. This is the thumb rule to characterize the biomolecule using mass spectrometer. So once you inject the sample, then you get the spectrum, and if you just look at the spectrum, say this is the spectrum of methanol, first look at the most intense peak in the spectrum. So the most intense peak in the spectrum, be it from the table or be it from the spectrum, that is referred to as the base peak, and you arbitrarily assign the relative abundance of 100%. Here in this example, it is the m by z, that is 31, that particular peak refers to the most intense peak, and we assign the relative abundance of 100% to that peak. Now the abundances of all the other peaks are given their proportionate values with reference to this peak 31, because now 31 is assigned relative abundance of 100%. So all other peaks, the abundances of all other peaks are given their proportionate values as percentages of the base peak, because now that intense peak is called as the base peak. So keeping that base peak as the relative abundance of 100%, the abundances of all other peaks are given the proportionate values as percentages of the base peak. And if you just look at some of the recent literature, some of the publications, they label the y-axis of the mass spectrum as number of ions or ion counts or relative intensity. Say some of the publications use these terminologies, but the term relative abundance is better and most commonly used terminology to refer to the number of ions in the mass spectrum. So this is most commonly used. You can see the usage of the terms number of ions, ion counts, as well as relative intensity. But the term relative abundance is better used and it is commonly used, that refer to the number of ions in the mass spectra. Right. Most of the positive ions have a charge corresponding to the loss of only one electron. What happens in case of large molecules? For larger molecules, multiple charged ions can also be obtained. So the ions are separated and detected according to the mass to charge ratio. Here the total charge of the ions is represented by Q, that is total charge of the ions represented by Q. The electron charge is represented by E, and the number of charges of the ions is represented by Z, that is Q is equal to Z times E. Q refers to total charge of the ions, E refers to electron charge, and Z refers to number of charges of the ions. So the x-axis of the spectrum, the mass spectrum, is represented by m by z, where m is the, or it is given as the relative mass, and z as the charge number, both of which are unitless. M by z, it is used to denote a dimensionless quantity, right? But generally in mass spectrometry, the charge is indicated in multiples of the elementary charge or charge of one electron in absolute value, and the mass is indicated in AMU, that is atomic mass units. So as stated earlier in the previous slide, the physical property that is measured is in the mass spectrometry is the mass to charge ratio. Now when the mass is expressed in AMU and the charge in elementary charge units, then the mass to charge ratio has U by E as dimensions. Now it has U by E as dimensions. So for simplicity, a new unit, that is the Thomson, which is symbolized as capital T and small h, it has been proposed, and the fundamental definition for this unit is given as 1 th is equal to 1 u by e, right? So with this, I'll stop my discussion here. We can continue our discussion in the next session. Thank you very much.